Great. Hi, everyone. My name is ZX. I work on crypto economics and ecosystem for Filecoin. And today I'm very excited to talk to you about HyperDrive Deep Dive and the various incentive consideration around the upgrade. And HyperDrive is a pretty big milestone on the Filecoin network since the network launch. So I'm very excited to just go over lots of this consideration. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Just some disclaimer first. This is a research talk on crypto economics and incentives, right? I think the big part of incentive is that different agents have different part of belief, they have their preferences, their expectation. So that will influence their behavior and their perception of the system, right? And then because there are so many agents in this network, the dynamics can be complex in this kind of setting. And of course, numbers can be wrong. So please do your own research and make your own decision. But if you see anything too off, feel free to reach out to us. Happy to discuss on like Slack, GitHub, and so on. So with that in mind, let's just recap on some of the concepts about like gas, hyperdrive, and what are the different like moving parts that this upgrade would impact. So to start off, let's just remind ourselves what is gas, right? Gas is a measure of computation and storage resources consumed by messages. It's a pretty common concept within blockchain today. And then there are a few other secondary concepts that are relevant to gas. So one is like gas limit. Gas limit is relevant for both messages and a block. That's basically, there's a limit on the amount of gas a message execution can consume, right? And then you also have the gas limit for a block, which is like how much gas this block can consume, right? And then you have the gas usage, which is the amount of gas that's actually used for the message execution. And the relationship between like limit and gas usage kind of tell us the gas limit set us the limit of like how many messages can we process on the network. And when we say that the network is growing at its limit, growing at its capacity, what that means is almost every block, right? Like all the messages use up all the limit of gas in that block, for example. And then you have the gas fee cap as a concept, which is basically it's from the message sender UX, right? Like the sender would specify this is the maximum amount of gas cost I'm going to pay for my message, and this is a gas fee cap. And lastly, we have the gas premium, or like the miner tip in some other literature, which is like this is a priority fee that is paid on top of the gas consumption to the miner for priority inclusion of certain messages into their block. So with that, and there's another concept called the base fee. So what is the base fee? Base fee was introduced in EIP 1559. Congratulations to the Ethereum community for launching this on a Robson testnet early in the week. We'll see how that goes, and feel free to experiment. And similarly, we use a very similar mechanism on Filecoin after some evaluation early on. Like there are many good properties that we want to include from EIP 1559, but on the high level, it's a poster price mechanism that improves the fee estimation UX. Prior to this mechanism, message sender need to kind of evaluate and guess, right? How much is a message worth to them, and trying to bid for the block space, bid for the space in the block. So base fee is basically tell here's a price, right? Take it or leave it. If it's too high for you, okay, walk away, right? You can come back later. If otherwise, you can take the poster price and then submit your message on chain. That simplifies the whole UX. And base fee really is a result of relative supply and demand of the network capacity. And it can be spiky at times because the demand for using a network is spiky, but it grows exponentially to try to find the equilibrium between supply and demand fairly quickly. So there's notion of network transaction fee, which is for every single message, it would be the amount of gas used multiplied by the base fee, right? Base fee is the measure of, okay, at this moment, what is the relative demand and supply for using the network, and gas usage is for each message or network as a whole, how much gas has been consumed, and then there's a network transaction fee that is burned to align everyone's interest with the network. And also just to touch point on why this network transaction fee is burned, there are many incentive considerations. We can find a lot more detail in Professor Tim Rothgarden's paper, but here are some high levels. So one is, as I mentioned, right, gas is a measure on the verification storage, the storage and compute resources that are used for verifying messages. So this is a cost that is shouldered by the whole network. So hence it makes sense for the message senders to pay the network. And one of the many more direct way is through this kind of network transaction fee. Alignment number 2, not burning also create some incentive issue, which is like senders and block producing miner can always arrange out-of-band payment, right? This is documented in the paper as well. And the alignment issue number 3, we also, Filecoin is a utility token, right? It's meant to be used. So we want to align the token supply with the network utility as manifested by this demand for using the network. And some historical charts. So far, the network has consumed more than 26 million of Filecoin network transaction fee, which is pretty remarkable. And the average daily network transaction fee is about 75 to 90,000 Filecoin every single day. So this is like this is a sign of a very popular, highly demanded, heavily used network, which is pretty rare in the crypto world today. And then just earlier in April, the network has a pretty big milestone, which is the crossing of the baseline for the very first time. Let's just recap on what is the baseline. Baseline is another innovative component within the Filecoin economics, where it sets a KPI for the network, right? The network minting kind of like is proportional to network utility as measured by this KPI. So the network so far has been growing very, very quickly. It's faster than this KPI that is set for the network, which starts from 2.8 exabyte at Genesis, and it doubles every year. So, and there's some other incentive consideration that comes out of this. So when we are below the baseline, your reward is sort of proportional to the storage, and it's increasing because the block reward, the total pool of block rewards is increasing when you're under the baseline as the network is catching up to its KPI. But after the baseline, the network then follows a 6-year half-life exponential decay. That's for the total network block reward. And that shifts the kind of the incentive and the dynamic among miners as well. What that means more concretely is we are now in this like Bitcoin or Ethereum style block reward model where there's a fixed block reward, right? Like there's a fixed block reward that is going down, and the miners are competing for a greater share of the pie, right? They are in this cooperative competition relationship. It's cooperative because there's a shared branding for Filecoin. There is this, everyone is a stakeholder within the network as token holders. We want the network to succeed. And there's lots of room to collaborate with the best practices and so on. But at the same time, we're competing for this common pool of block reward, right? And if miners add more than the network average, right, they get ahead, they get a bigger share of the pie, the reward increase. If miner adds the same, the reward stay the same. If it adds less than network average, the reward will decrease. So here's like another, just some historical data from like a week ago. The red line is the network growth over this week, right? And then like this is the y-axis is the percentage miner above that growth, right? So we have about 20% of the miners are growing faster than the network, so their share of the reward will increase. The remaining 80% are kind of like lagging behind. So like, given that this is a dynamic, this is the overall macro environment that we are in, miners are strongly incentivized to increase the quality adjusted power either through Filecoin Plus deals or through stealing more committed capacity sectors. Another thing to just call out here, the collateral requirement is proportional to the expected reward and the storage, right? So as the network increases in size, the per unit storage reward will go down, but the per unit collateral will also go down. So these two go hand in hand, and then like the network keeps track of the rate of growth of the protocol keeps track of the rate of growth of the network to adjust the collateral accordingly. So it takes into the account of the growth rate of the network. So just to recap again, what is quality adjusted power, right? Quality adjusted power of a sector is the sector quality multiplier multiplied by the raw byte power. And what is the quality multiplier? It's the space-time weighted average of the quality multiplier of the content in a sector. Then what are the different contents? There are three main kinds. You have committed capacity of the quality multiplier of 1. Then you have regular deals, multiplier of 1. And then you have Filecoin Plus client deal with multiplier of 10. And here are some examples. You can think of each sector as a container. Then you can put different kind of content within the sector. So for example, let's say half of the sector space-time is occupied by Filecoin Plus deals, right? Then we get this like 5.5 of sector quality. The sector quality adjusted power will be 5.5 multiplied by the raw byte, which is 32 GB in this case, right? If let's say a quarter is occupied by Filecoin Plus deals, then you get a different sector quality. And how do you get more Filecoin Plus deals, right? Like this is I think Filecoin Plus has made tremendous progress. I encourage everyone to participate. It's a pretty groundbreaking thing in all of Web3, where we add a layer of social consensus on top of a pure resource-driven network. So far, there have been more than 2 petabyte of Filecoin Plus data allocation with notaries and miners from all over the world doing BD for the network. I just learned that I think just earlier on, there's this the new Filecoin Plus notary application have been approved. So we have another extra, I think more than 5 petabyte of Filecoin Plus data allocation. The whole network should work together to find more clients, right? There's also Filecoin Plus for large data sets to just let them try Filecoin, showcase Filecoin, and store to earn, right? Potentially, right? There are lots of different room for experimentation just to get people make use of Filecoin to really demonstrate all the different features that our miners can provide, right? There's also store and retrieve. I encourage clients can just get some data allocation, try to find a miner, and given that it's still pretty early stages, lots of room, lots of business opportunities that will emerge on the Filecoin network. Just to recap on this cooperative competition, we are now past the baseline. We follow the traditional proof of work kind of minting model. There's a fixed pool of block reward, and that's divided by the pool of miners. Everyone is strongly incentivized to increase the share of the reward. And just to recap on the stages of economy, we are kind of moving past stage 1. We have built lots of capacity. So far, the storage has been pretty reliable, a very robust and thriving dynamic ecosystem with secure proof. And as baseline minting picks up, right? Like I think HyperDrive is a classic example of like reducing the cost of mining and using the network, making the proof more efficient, and also making the chain more scalable, right? I think going forward, we'll try to make, as a community, make retrieval more efficient. And I think all miners are now strongly incentivized to improve the quality of service to get more clients and potentially more deal payment for using the network. So with that, I think now that's the overall on the macro side. Let's now dive into some of the gas changes that that comes with HyperDrive. So on the high level, HyperDrive unlocks 10 to 25x increase in network capacity. Sometimes people call it the TPS or like the throughput. This is huge, right? And this is done through reducing the unit storage gas usage of some of the most popular messages. Remember, we talked about the gas limit and the gas usage. When you reduce the gas usage of certain messages, you are improving the throughput, and gas limit is pretty much set by some other physical limit. But this is all on how this is all good, but there are some incentive consideration that we must take into account. Oops. Go back. So I think the order gets off here. So let's talk about this slide first. So there are a few incentive issues. The first one is correct. So we talk about here's an illustration of the reduction in gas usage per unit of storage, right? Like, so this is the sector. This is gas usage for adding 1 unit of sector onto the chain, right? So without aggregation, adding a single method, it will cost you about 60 million gas unit, right? And with aggregation, this cost get amortized over the sectors that you're aggregating. So like, as we can see, this unit storage gas usage kind of decreases pretty significantly as you aggregate, right? So this motivates us to talk about some of the incentive problem with HyperDrive as it was. So one is miner fairness, right? Like, so as we've seen from the previous slide, right? Like this cost saving, it decreases, this cost saving is pretty significant as the amount of aggregation increases, right? So that creates an additional advantage for economies of scale, right? So like smaller miners or like clients and so on and so forth, it might not be fair for miners who can't aggregate as much, and so on and so forth. So we want to make sure the gas cost is proportional to the storage to make it fair, just like your reward is proportional to the storage as well, right? The second point here is as we create this gas saving for particular kind of gas, particular messages, we really want to share this cost reduction with other messages as well. This include, for example, like deals, public storage deals. Filecoin is a utility network, is a useful network. We want to make deals cheap on Filecoin. And also, with this third point, with this reduction in onboarding storage, miners who can take advantage of this get a greater share of the total block reward, right? And we want them to kind of like be aligned with the network and pay the network for doing so. And all participants in this whole economy should benefit from this change in network capacity. And lastly, there's another nuance point here is without any change to what we saw just now, right? Like if you can aggregate, your gas usage is way smaller, right? In the event there's a base fee attack on the network, which is some form of DDoS attack, but the attacker is paying the cost of like sending a lot of messages to the network, right? Miners who can aggregate have a much smaller exposure to this kind of attack compared to like smaller miner or miner who cannot aggregate as much compared to like clients, for example, right? Because they don't get this like disproportional in gas usage saving. So we really want to like kind of like even out, not create any unbalance in the incentive. Everybody share. We kind of like share this like risk of the network. We share this success of the network as well. We mitigate this uneven impact to different participants with this reduction in gas usage. So here are the gas changes. So there are 3 concepts that we introduced. One is called batch gas charge. So the network fee should be proportional to the amount of storage that you're adding. So basically you have this single proof gas usage, right? The gas charge for this like proof commit messages is really based on the number of proof that you are batching. So it's proportional to the amount of storage that you're adding, but given that if let's say all else equal, the supply of network capacity increases, the base fee should go down, right? So this net is still a very big saving for all miners, right? And then we introduce the batch balancer and the batch discount. These two basically work together to create some kind of balancing dynamic and to share this cost reduction with other messages to kind of like keep the base fee low and also have like different to make the cost of making deals cheaper, for example. We'll go over that in a moment. So introducing gas charge, right? So this is this chart here. On the x-axis, we have like the daily network growth for the network, right? On the y-axis is the gas unit in terms of gas usage, right? On log scale. So the orange dots here, these are like how much gas would we consume on a daily basis if the network is onboarding at a certain rate, right? And then on the gray dot is basically the gas usage if everybody's aggregating to the max. How much gas will we consume, right? But clearly it's not proportional, right? After when gas charge is introduced, now this is the this green dot, right? The gas charge, gas unit spent is proportional to the amount of storage that you're adding, just like as if there's no aggregation. But the beauty of this is it does not interfere with the gas usage. So the gas charge is just an additional charge. It doesn't change the base fee, right? So base fee can be way low. So that makes the cost savings still very significant. But that makes sure that there's no incentive misalignment on the micro level. And then we have the batch balancer and the batch discount, right? It creates this balancing dynamic for base fee. As mentioned earlier, like HyperDrive introduces 10 to 25x increase in supply, right? But it's unclear how the system will adjust. It's unclear how the demand will pick up, right? So this creates this like balancing dynamic to incentivize aggregation when the network is approaching its capacity to free up more chain bandwidth, and that creates a self-regulating force. And the other effect here is to share the cost reduction with other messages. So as a rough estimate, right, these numbers could be wrong, right? With the parameter that we recommend, we hope the base fee would hover around like a 0.15 nanofield compared to a significant drop from where it was today, right? And note that if let's say the demand is very, very strong, there's no guarantee that the base fee will stay in the level, right? Base fee is still in the hands of the community. And with this level of base fee, a network can grow at a much faster rate that it was not possible before. I think like more than 500 petabyte and more. And at that level of base fee, the public storage deal should cost about cost a much smaller number compared to what it was today. And the amortized proof commit cost will also go down pretty significantly compared to where it was today as well. And just going back to the previous slide to just mention one more point, just to note that all these dots, right, like the blue line is the gas limit of the network. So in theory, you can really grow way much higher than this blue line without incurring a pretty high base fee. But I just want to call as well, right? This chart is not static; it's also dynamic in the sense that engineers and developers make improvement to the protocol all the time, right? Before HyperDrive, the network onboarding capacity has improved at least 2x to 3x. So that actually shift this like dots further down. So like we're expecting like more than 500 and more 500 petabyte or even 1 exabyte of storage growth per day on the Filecoin network. Great. So I'm going to just talk. Now I'm going to run through some scenario to illustrate this balancing dynamic that the balancer and the discount creates. So we have the so at the network base fee of 0.01 nano field, right? So the unit economics is actually in favor of adding single proof. This means the network is very underutilized. It doesn't really. It's better. It's okay if you don't aggregate, right? So like smaller miner can actually take advantage of this to onboard storage more cheaply. But as the network demand picks up, right? Like as the base fee increases, so let's say 0.1 nano field, or even like 0.15, the unit network fee for a single proof goes up, right? This is where the amortization advantage starts to kick in, right? You see this descending gradient. People are incentivized to aggregate onboard storage through batch commit. And then in the hypothetical scenario, when base fee is going up to 1 or 2 nanofield, which is considered low historically, right? Miners are then strongly incentivized to aggregate. That would take advantage of the cost saving, and that would free up more chain capacity. So that would create this balancing dynamic for the base fee. So overall, so here is the summary of some key takeaway. I think like mining will become cheaper. The unit storage cost of mining reduces very significantly, as we can see from the charts. Faster network growth. The network can now grow at a much faster rate as miner can now capitalize on the gas cost saving, and also cheaper deals, right? Because we have this mechanism to share this cost reduction with other operations, most importantly deals, and the whole network benefits because miner who benefit more also pay more to the network to be aligned with the network's incentive. And lastly, we are now in this cooperative competition landscape, and miners are incentivized to grow their quality adjusted power, whether through more sealing or through more Filecoin Plus deals to outpace the network. With that, I'm super high for HyperDrive. I hope you are high level HyperDrive as well. And now we can move on to some Q&A. So in terms of batch commit messages, if you see miners who maliciously choose not to include the message on chain, what would happen? So I think like there are multiple miners where like it depends. If let's say all miners decide to not include, that could be an issue. And there's also with HyperDrive, there is a longer window for you to submit your messages. So over that period, actually like it's a pretty long period. You should be able to find miners who include the messages. And separately, that's also a question of miner tip as well, right? Like, can you pay miner to prioritize the inclusion of your messages? Juan, do you have anything to add?
I think that's right.
Yeah. And there's another question about the more specific equations around how do we compute pre-commit and proof commit. I believe that is that's for the pre-commit deposit, and then for proof commit, that would be the collateral. So for pre-commit, it's expected 20 days of reward. I think the calculations are on chain, right? It's inside spec sectors, and then proof commit is basically the expected 20 days reward, and then plus a share, which is the expected 20 days reward is initial storage pledge, and then you have the initial consensus pledge, which is a fraction of the circulating supply, normalized by the amount of storage. Next question. This is very hard to translate, guys. Next question is, so there were some like base fee spiking attack, right? How do we really solve this, right? Like previously, there were miner accidentally burning some Filecoin to spike the base fee. So here's my answer to that attack, right? It's not really an attack, it's a protection mechanism, right? When somebody is spamming the network with many messages, right? Like the base fee go up, right? That is deterring them from like that they're incurring a big cost for doing so. So like that is actually a protective mechanism for the protocol when somebody try to spam the chain.
Yeah, but the attack part is when somebody maliciously sends a bunch of messages to spike up the base fee so that other other miners have higher gas costs during that period.
Yeah. So the question is there how can we like solve this and so on? Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that I think about this is that by creating this lane for all of the aggregated proof commits, spiking the base fee and getting it really high now is usually a huge fraction of the messages that contributed to that were that contributed to the normal gas cost were the standard pre and proof commit messages. Now that as soon as the base fee rises above a certain level, most of those would move into aggregation and would go into the aggregate channel, and so they would no longer contribute to that. So that means that the expenditures of somebody trying to mount this attack would be like would have to be way higher. So any party that is trying to kind of increase the base fee and so on will have to pay dramatically more in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yep. There's a follow-up question here. If the whole network would, let's say if a particular miner maybe is being irrational, and that may cause the whole network to like to experience some kind of issue, how do we guarantee the stability of the network, for example? I think like that goes back to it's the same answer to the, I think it would be a similar answer, right? Like the cost of doing so is actually very high. And then it's even higher with HyperDrive because now everybody can shift towards aggregation, and then the attacker have to face a much higher cost.
Yeah, so and all blockchain networks have these kinds of attacks. Whenever you have a permissionless setting that enables anyone to use a fixed resource of a network, then that means that all of these are open to an irrational attack from parties that just want to spam. And so this is why you have mechanisms that are market oriented that increase the fee structure according to the usage, so that if that spam keeps going on, then the price of that keeps increases, and then at some point these attackers run out of money.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
EIP 1559 is very useful for this kind of thing. Any of these kinds of attacks will run up the base fee on the attacker themselves, and they will burn a large amount of money doing this. Now, the benefit of aggregation is that during that period, when that's happening, you can still do all kinds of pre and proof commits in the aggregation layer, and move a huge fraction of the gas costs into that.
Yep, and then Junyao also mentioned, just reading out for the audience out there, answering to Jackie's question earlier about like about the irrational attacks through gas, right? Like if the whole network is a factor, most miners can decide to not include the messages, and then and it's also easy to identify in the event of such attacks.
Yeah, and that might also help for that might also be a good solution for spam style messages. Those miners can also, of course, identify those and try to not include them. There's another good statement here around saying, hey, shifting to aggregation today requires restarting the Lotus miner, so it's not really easy to do. It would be better if this setting could be checked by the time just live and be able to shift that while the miner is running. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and this is something where I think eventually this would be a feature that people are likely to add. I can defer to folks working on Lotus to answer that, but I think this is something that is likely a feature that will come in time. And if you have a good idea on how to implement it, you can file a pull request on GitHub to bring that feature to life.
Great. I think we are at time for live Q&A. Should we move to Slack?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, CX. This is a great presentation.